Okay, here's a wild thought. What if you could take modern accounting principles and apply them to an army from ancient myth? Well, today, that's exactly what we're going to do. We are auditing one of the most legendary conflicts ever described, the Kurukshetra War from the Mahabharata. Let's dig in and see what the numbers really tell us. So, the big question is, how on earth do you even begin to audit an army from a myth? I mean, it sounds impossible, right? To treat it like a real-world balance sheet, you absolutely need a standard unit of measurement. And luckily for us, the Mahabharata actually gives us one. And that is the key that unlocks this whole thing. All right, so the Kurukshetra War. This was a truly colossal conflict, an epic showdown between two branches of the very same family, the Pandavas and the Kauravas. And to even begin to wrap our heads around the sheer scale of their armies, we have to find a consistent way to count them. And that standard unit? It's called an Akshauhini. Now, you can think of it as the ancient Indian equivalent of, say, a modern army division, but with one crucial difference. It had a very specific, totally fixed composition. Honestly, this single term is the reason we can even do this audit. So what is an Akshauhini? Well, it's a battle group, and it's always made up of 4 key components. You've got your chariots, your war elephants, cavalry, and of course, your infantry. But here's what's so critical for our audit. These parts weren't just thrown together. They were always combined in a precise, non-negotiable ratio. Okay, so let's actually build one. We're going to break down how one of these absolutely massive battle groups is constructed, from the ground up. It all starts with the smallest possible unit, and then, as you'll see, it just explodes exponentially from there. And here is the heart of it all, the core ratio. For every single chariot, you had to have 1 elephant, 3 horsemen, and 5 foot soldiers. That's it. This 1 to 1 to 3 to 5 formula. That is the fundamental building block for the entire army structure. This ratio was then applied across a really strict hierarchy. You start with the smallest unit, which is called a pati, and you multiply it by 3 to get the next level up, a senamak. Then you multiply that by 3 to get a gulma. And it just keeps going like that, all the way up the chain. This constant tripling, well, let's just say it builds to some truly mind-boggling numbers. And here, this is where the math just gets wild. Look at this. We start with a single pati. That's 1 chariot, 1 elephant, a handful of soldiers. Simple enough. But as you climb that ladder, by the time you reach the Ankini level, you're already talking about over 2,000 chariots. And then, for the final step, get this. That number is multiplied by 10, and that gives us the final count for just 1 Akshauhini. Over 21,000 chariots, 21,000 elephants, 65,000 cavalry, and almost 110,000 infantry. Incredible. You add all of that up, and a single Akshauhini has 218,700 combatants. And let me say that again, that is just one of these battle groups. All right, so now that we have our standard unit of measurement, we can finally perform the audit. Let's apply this to the 2 armies on the field and see what the balance sheet for this epic war actually looked like. So, according to the text, the Pandavas showed up with 7 Akshauhinis, but the Kauravas, they brought 11. So right out of the gate, you can see the Kaurava forces had a pretty major advantage in terms of sheer numbers. But when you break that down into the raw numbers of soldiers and equipment, the difference is just, it's stark. The Pandava army totaled a little over 1.5 million combatants. The Kaurava army? A staggering 2.4 million strong. In every single category, chariots, elephants, cavalry, infantry, the Pandavas were just massively, massively outnumbered. To put an even finer point on it, the Kauravas had a surplus of almost 875,000 soldiers. Think about that. The Pandavas were facing a disadvantage that was bigger than half the size of their entire army. I mean, on paper, this should have been an open and shut case, a clear victory for the Kauravas. But, as we know, that is not what happened. And this brings us to the real takeaway from our little audit here. The numbers all point to an impossible victory. So how in the world did the smaller army win? Well, the answer isn't in the spreadsheet. It's in the strategy. You see, the 2 sides had completely different philosophies of war. The Kauravas were all about brute force. They relied on their sheer numerical superiority, just a massive wave of humanity designed to overwhelm and demoralize their enemy. And they were led by legendary veterans like Bhishma and Drona. The Pandavas, on the other hand, had to be smarter. They focused on strategic deployment. Sure, they had some of the greatest warriors of the age, like Arjuna and Bhima, but their real ace in the hole was the divine counsel of Krishna, whose guidance was the ultimate game changer. And this is summed up perfectly by the authors of the paper this is based on. They say, and I quote, "The audit of the Pandava and Kaurava armies reveals that numerical strength alone does not guarantee victory. It's that simple. This battle just wasn't won on the spreadsheet." So you might be thinking, what's the point of all this? Why audit a mythological army? Well, it's because the core lessons here about resource management, about strategy, about leadership, they are absolutely timeless.
Look, the Pandavas' victory is a timeless case study. It proves, without a doubt, that superior strategy and brilliant leadership can overcome a frankly insane numerical disadvantage. It is the ultimate example of quality over quantity. And that's a principle that's just as true today, whether you're talking about business or defense or anything else, as it was on the battlefield of Kurukshetra.
So our audit proves it. Numbers on a page don't determine the outcome, which leaves us with one last really critical question to think about. If it's not the size of the army that guarantees victory, then what truly does?